The time is just gone 9:33 a.m. on News and Views this morning, and we are now focusing on Israel Apartheid Week 2021. And this morning, we are going to be joined by Professor Jeff Halper, former head of the Israel Committee Against House Demolitions. Remembering Rachel Corrie, this was the American pro-Palestinian activist who was crushed to death by the Israeli Defense Forces in March 2003. Professor Jeff Halper, good morning to you, sir, and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good to be on.
Yes, always great having you with us. Now, obviously, quite a week this week, Israel Apartheid Week 2021, against the background of racism, discrimination, and the like as well. But also March 2003, the case of Rachel Corrie. And this is remembered at a time like this.
Yes, it's been now 18 years since Rachel's death. And, we all remember her. She wasn't the only foreign person who was killed, of course, but she became emblematic, I think, of everyone. She was a very articulate young woman, very principled. And, of course, her death was a very tragic death that was never, ever, even though it went to court, was never, ever really admitted to by the Israeli army. So it remains a kind of an open wound, actually, in our circles. But Rachel certainly was kind of a point, mobilized us, galvanized us to really focus on our work. And I think her presence has been with us all these years. And of course, she really is one of the most well-known figures. I think her parents have been very active. I know her family very well. So I think they've carried on her struggle. It didn't end with Rachel's tragic death, but it continues, and she's alive as a symbol, and her struggle is still alive.
Well, certainly, and obviously we know what the ruling was at the end of the day, and where the Israeli court obviously rejected the case and upheld the results of the 2003 military investigations. But the key issue here at this point in time, coming at a time like this, Israel Apartheid Week 2021, we're talking about justice. We're talking about even organizations like Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and all of them have basically been critical against this decision that was taken as far as Rachel Corrie is concerned. But looking at where we are, looking at it, Professor Halper, from a human rights perspective, and also the entire theme of this year's Israel Apartheid Week, which talks about racism, discrimination, and as we remember Rachel Corrie, what are your thoughts looking at the theme of 2021 on Israel Apartheid Week?
Well, I think these themes are important, obviously. I mean, we have what we call a hybrid regime here. It's a regime of occupation on one level, but the occupation is only of 22% of historic Palestine, we have to remember. Then we have an apartheid regime on the entire country, but beyond that, the entire country, the foundation of all of this is Zionism as a settler colonial movement. That's the point we have to really understand. And I think we have to begin to introduce the idea of settler colonialism. And South Africa is a perfect place to do that, because apartheid was the result. It wasn't just the result of racism. You had a bunch of white people that decided to be racist and were racist and had discrimination. That wasn't the point. The point was that South Africa was settler colonized. The settlers came in and said, this is now our country. We have all the rights. And structurally, ideologically, racism became the way the system worked. So that's what we have to really keep in mind today. We're not talking about racism in the sense of discrimination. You have that all over the world. An apartheid system is when the racism is structural and it's ideological. And the only way, as you did in South Africa to a certain degree, the only way to get beyond it is to decolonize the settler state. So I think we have to start putting concepts like racism, discrimination, and apartheid into its wider context, which is settler colonialism, and really begin to explain why that means that Palestinians can never, ever, ever have equal rights. Even if Israeli Jews love Palestinians, they can never have equal rights as long as the system is a colonial system that gives all the rights to the settlers. We have to decolonize it.
I think what you're saying is very, very important and very, very pertinent, Professor Halper, in terms of the whole colonization, but also in terms of the mindset. And I think this is when we celebrate Israel Apartheid Week 2021. This is something that we need to bear in mind. We need to change our mindset. We know that, as you mentioned, racism exists right across the entire world. Amongst communities, amongst tribes, and one sees it right across the entire world. But the key issue here is if we're going to be focusing a lot just on the racism aspect, I don't think we will get very far when one obviously does not start thinking deeply about the system, the ideological mindset, which needs to change.
That's right, exactly. And then that leads to the next missing piece in what we have today, and that is an end game. All right, we're against apartheid, we're against racism, we're against colonialism, we want decolonization. What does that mean? What is our program? In other words, you can rail against apartheid and racism all you want on a moral basis, but what are you going to do about it? How do you end it? What is your program? And that's where we're right now in a very weak position, because our program for many years was the two-state idea. But that's clearly gone. There was in a settler colonial reality, there was never the idea that Zionism would actually give the Palestinians any kind of a state. So the two-state solution isn't only dead, it was never alive. But we haven't really articulated yet the alternative. That's why I'm very involved now in a Palestinian-led group here. It's called the One Democratic State Campaign. And we have a 10-point program. You can look that up on our website at onestatecampaign.org, in which we say if the problem is settler colonialism and we have to decolonize, what does that mean? And where are we going? What kind of a new society, a new polity, a new political community do we want that's inclusive of everyone, but based on equal rights, the refugees returning, and a completely, absolutely new situation here? That's decolonization. And I think, if people want to support the struggle here, I think they have to begin to support our movement or any movement that comes and says, this is the way out. This is a political program. Because unless we bring a political program in the end game into the political arena, we're just left with slogans, we're left with moral positions and so on, which are very nice, but they don't resolve the issue.
Exactly. And I think, obviously we've seen so much as far as slogans are concerned, and it's a rhetoric that is being repeated over and over again and has been repeated for the last 7 decades. And this is possibly one of the reasons why we are not making any progress, Professor Halper.
Exactly. And I think now we have, it's still early on. We're still developing the program. We're still, trying to get a Palestinian buy-in. We're still trying to get the international, and in a sense, what we're trying to do in the One Democratic State movement is what you did in South Africa. When the ANC was faced with a dominant white community that was not going to dismantle apartheid, a government that was hostile, an international governmental system that was hostile to the anti-apartheid movement, what you did was to appeal to the international civil society. You mobilized churches, mosques, religious groups, trade unions, university groups, political groups. You went to the people, the grassroots of the world, and they were your main allies in the fight against apartheid. And that's, I think, the situation we're in here. In that sense, it's very close. And that is, we're never going to convince dominant Israeli Jews to dismantle apartheid, occupation, settler colonialism. They're not going to do it. Why would they do that? They're enjoying this system. They're on top of it. We have a houseful government of Netanyahu and whoever comes after him. The international community of governments does not support us. The EU, or even many African governments, to tell you the truth, or the US and so on. So what we have to do, I think, is the same thing the ANC did. And that is to appeal to the international people, the international civil society, the international grassroots to support our struggle. So when I'm talking to your audience, I'm not just saying support the One Democratic State campaign morally or financially. I'm saying adopt it as become our allies, real allies, and help us to push this agenda into the political arena, because this is the only end game that is going to end this in a just manner.
Just finally, Professor Halper, just your thoughts, and I'm not too certain whether you are aware of it, where we've got a huge debate going on and a discussion point in South Africa at this point in time with regard to the Chief Justice of South Africa. And, obviously he's used Christianity, he's used religious beliefs as his justification for his support for the state of Israel, and looking at it from a Christian perspective. And he has been asked to basically apologize, which he refuses to do at this point in time. And I just needed your thoughts on, prominent people using religion, using religious justification for supporting the Zionist entity.
Well, I mean, that gets into some dangerous waters because, the problem with religion is fine as a faith. The minute religion gets involved in the political arena, it becomes very problematic, because religion is an absolute. If God tells you this, then, I'm not going to argue. And so once you introduce an absolute that's based on faith, and my faith is the right way to go, and you try to put that into a political arena where the whole idea is you're trying to listen to another side, to other perspectives. There's different views. It's changing. You've got to compromise. You have to look at justice and so on. It becomes very hard, because the religion can sometimes lock you into a particular mindset, as you're talking about, that seems to you moral, and maybe it is to you moral. You can be a moral person, but it prevents you from understanding the other side, or the many other sides, and from coming to conclusions that might be different from what your religion says. So if your religion says, this is the land of Israel that belongs to the Jews, if that's your form of Christianity, for example, you're not going to get to decolonization and justice for Palestinians. And the problem is, when you compare religion to political analysis, if you're religious, the religion is going to win out. And so it's a very complicated and dangerous thing to kind of mix religion into political issues, to tell you the truth.
Well, Professor Halper, thank you very much for that. And as always, for your time with us here on Salam Media. All the best to you, sir.
Thanks for having me on.
Professor Jeff Halper joining us this morning out of Israel. The time is just gone 8:47 a.m. We'll be back, and we'll be talking this morning about bite breach, and obviously we'll be talking with Patricia DeLille.